The dogma of caloric theory that we are just living from the oxidation of glucose doesn't hold up to scientific studies. If the idea would be true that life energy is just coming from the oxidation of glucose, then direct and indirect calorimetry should be the same. And it already showed that there was a paper in Nature, 1973, how much food does man require? And the answer is more or less we don't know, because it differs from person to person so much. This idea of the caloric theory was put forth by Antoine Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry. And this idea from the 18th century is still in our heads. This fitted so well in the ideas of enlightenment, that man is a machine, because René Descartes said that all organic creation is mechanistic. In the 18th and 19th century, when technology was rising and they saw, we can do everything, they just forgot about the spiritual realm. Where is this energy coming from? We cannot account for. And this is life energy in whatever form. Why are we living, and how can we maximize life energy? But also, what for me is most important, questioning the materialistic worldview. So what is matter? What is consciousness?
Welcome to Sunlight Matters, the podcast that reconnects us with the sun. Join us as we explore the power and influence of our star, the force at the heart of everything. Each episode, we speak with leading experts to uncover the ways sunlight shapes our world.
Welcome to this episode of the podcast, PA. Lovely to have you with us. I wonder if you could just start by introducing yourself and talk a bit about what you do, and then we can kind of get into some of the interesting things that you've done and are doing.
Great. Thanks, Dave. So originally, I'm a filmmaker. I studied at the Film Academy, and in the 1990s, I got a lot of interest in transpersonal psychology, and so I came into meditation and yoga. And this led me to a meditation teacher, where I heard from other students that he does not eat. And this was the beginning of an amazing journey for many, many years, where I studied and filmed this strange phenomenon of Breatharianism. It's called in English Breatharianisms. There are a lot of different names around the world. In Austria, it's called Lichtnahrung, which means light nourishment, and has a lot to do with the sun. And we will talk about that. And the movie is called In the Beginning There Was Light. I was doing 10 years of research for the movie, 5 years of shooting around the world. And I learned so much during making this movie. A lot that is not in the movie, but that is important for the subtext. And in Austria, in the beginning, there was light, was huge. It was in cinemas here, and it was bigger than most Hollywood movies. And
Wow.
it was sold all around the world. But for example, in the English-speaking countries, it was really just for a small, tiny part of people who are interested, especially in this topic. But for me, the movie is not really about people who eat or not eat. That's just like the hook line or the surface. In reality, it's about what is life energy. So why are we living, and how can we maximize life energy? But also, what for me is most important, questioning the materialistic worldview. So what is matter, what is consciousness, is consciousness and soul really just coming out of matter, is life energy just coming out of matter? These are the most important things I question in this book, in this film. I'm also an author. Speaking about books, I also wrote 3 bestseller books about intermittent fasting, because during this journey, I also learned about the phenomenon of autophagy in 2008, long before there was the Nobel Prize. And so I started doing intermittent fasting, and so I wrote three books about this as well, and it fits very well into this topic of Breatharianism and subtle energies nourishing the body.
Amazing. And I mean, I've seen the movie, and I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to have a watch, because it's deeply, deeply fascinating. I think we'll provide a link to it in the sort of show notes so people can access it. But it's a deeply fascinating movie, and I think for me, the idea that people can survive without eating, as the sort of premise. And I know that there's a sort of broader context, which we'll kind of come back to, but that as the premise, and then kind of working that through from a almost scientific, or not almost, but from a scientific point of view, I found super interesting. Because, I guess if someone said to me, like, and, I've had this discussion with my family, that there are people who can survive without eating, and some of them without drinking as well. I mean, it just sounds impossible.
It's very provoking, and I mean that was the idea. And we have to say, from a scientific standpoint, we cannot say if, like, Prahlad really didn't eat for 70 or 80 years or didn't drink. But what we can say from a scientific standpoint, and we have quite a few studies about that, is that the dogma of caloric theory, that we are just living from the oxidation of glucose, doesn't hold up to scientific studies. And we see that, for example, if we compare direct and indirect calorimetry. So if the dogma, or if the idea would be true, that life energy is just coming from the oxidation of glucose, then direct and indirect calorimetry should be the same. So if I measure how much oxygen is going in and how much carbon dioxide is going out, then this amount should be more or less the same as the amount of energy produced by the body, if you deduct all the things going out of the body. And it already showed that there was a paper in Nature in 1973. It was called "How Much Food Does Man Require?" And the answer is more or less, we don't know, because it differs from person to person so much that we cannot answer the question. Because this idea of the caloric theory was put forth by Antoine Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry, in 1777. And he said that the combustion processes in machines are more or less the same as the processes in metabolism. And this idea from the 18th century is still in our heads. People still think this is true, and this fitted so well in the ideas of enlightenment, that man is a machine, more or less, because René Descartes said that all organic creation is mechanistic. This became the dogma. René Descartes still said that everything works mechanistic, but only humans are connected via the pineal gland with the spiritual realm. But in the 18th and 19th century, when technology was rising and they saw, we can do everything, they just forgot about the spiritual realm. And in the 19th century, it was actually in 1973 when three scientific organizations came together and asked this heretic question: how much food does man require? Because caloric theory doesn't work in reality. When it's like a Gaussian curve. The formulas to calculate the caloric needs fit for most people more or less, not for everybody. It's like a scale that would say a man in your age with your height weighs 73 kilos. That fits for most people with my height. But, I can weigh 30 kilos more or 30 kilos less. And they saw that this doesn't work. And in 1980, there was a doctor called Paul Webb who built calorimeters for NASA. And he said, the better the measurements, the bigger are the amounts of energy we cannot account for. And he saw that in completely normal people, up to 23% of the energy you cannot explain calorically. And it's also said in the studies, when you go to lightdocumentary.com, I have all the links to these studies. And he also said especially when you have in fasting, for example, when you have a caloric deficit, then this amount of unmeasured energy, they called it, then it's especially big. And in my perception, we are speaking here about completely normal people, not about breatharians. Up to 23%, so you cannot say this is something like a measurement thing. It's really like up to a quarter of the whole energy. And in my perception, in these breatharians, this amount of energy you cannot calculate for is just bigger. If it's going up really to 100%, I don't know. But the interesting part is, where is this energy coming from we cannot account for? And this is life energy. In whatever form. In China, they call it bigu, bigu fuqi. Bigu means without bread, but directly through qi, the life energy. And they say that we all take, of course, qi via the food, and we will talk later about how the life energy is coming into the food by the sun. But it's also coming directly into the body in all people. But the amount of this direct qi differs from person to person and from situation to situation. And also this energy called qi or prana in India isn't known in mainstream science because you cannot measure it. But we also have to say that modern science cannot produce one single living cell out of dead matter. So there is a big black hole. And
the big knowledge gap.
Yeah, there's a huge knowledge gap. And I once spoke with an Ayurvedic doctor, and he said to me, classical medicine and classical science cannot speak about life energy because on the basics they have their knowledge from dissecting corpses. So the huge revolution about modern medicine was breaking the taboo of dissecting corpses. So they fully understood the mechanical plan, how the body works. But he said, if you study dead matter, of course you do not understand chi and prana and the energetic forces. So for me, when I did all this research, this question of life energy became bigger and bigger. And there was this famous psychologist Wilhelm Reich, who tried to bring the idea of life energy into the scientific discussion. He called it orgon, what's more or less chi or prana. And what happened to him? First, the Nazis burned his books because he was a Jew. Then he went to America. And then the Food and Drug Administration burned his books, and he went to jail because he said that a judge cannot judge about science stuff, and then he died in jail. But
what was the official reason they jailed him? Like, do you know what the official?
Because he said you know, he had these organ accumulators.
Mm-hmm.
And cloudbusters and that stuff, and he wasn't willing to put these things away. He said, "I'm true."
But if they wouldn't work, then they wouldn't have a reason to ask him to lock it away, right? I mean,
yeah. And the funny thing is, you know, all the research about biophotons came out of the research from Wilhelm Reich. That's Fritz Albert Popp, the pioneer of biophoton research, of course, was very careful to not say this is organ energy. But you know, biophotons, that's a fact. You know, that's this weak light radiation that is in all cells. But the skeptics say, okay, it's an epiphenomenon. You know, it's here, but there's no meaning to it. But Fritz Albert Popp says these biophotons, the light of life, you may call it, is the essence of light, and it's very weak. This is a very weak light, but this very weak light is the carrier of information, the carrier of coherent information coming from the sun, stored in the plants and indirect in the animals. And if we eat the food, then we get the light. He says, if you look at the chemical formula of sugar, then you can divide it into carbon dioxide and water. And then both goes out of the body. What stays is the light and the information in this light. And I also spoke to consciousness scientists, and they said, what is consciousness? Consciousness is this information. If consciousness leaves the body, then it quickly falls apart into dead matter, into dust. So the interesting things are not the material substances, but the information that makes out of that living, out of that matter, a living organism. And it seems that this information, or at least the biophotons, are one way, one key to understand life energy, not the only one. But
I mean, I can imagine that many people, also our listeners, for them this might be just a big stretch from their worldview. And as you have mentioned, I think it's really interesting that the Western science has always worked on dead matter. I think it's a very understandable philosophy difference. If you work on dead matter, of course you don't even deal with life energy at all. Versus
absolutely. I think
the Eastern philosophies, they are based on it. It's like this is for them, it's actually the other way. It's like completely the other way around. And I'm always somehow optimistic that in the end both of them meet, and then it's like the connection's established, and then one side understands the other and the other side understands the other one, and then you have synthesis, as you also like to say, right?
Absolutely. And I think it was Wilhelm Reich who said science is necrophilic, because first you have to kill the things to watch them. If you look at something in the electron microscope, you first have to kill it and prepare it, and then you look at it. Of course, you don't understand the mystery of life. But this would, as you said, I think this is the most important thing that that these worldviews start communicating, because of course it was fantastic what classical science did to us, and to
Totally.
understand the mechanistic plan of the body. That's fantastic, but it's just one piece, and it has to come together with this wisdom of the East, and we can learn a lot from them. And
Yeah, and I mean, it is like the human body is like a machine, but not 100%. It's like a hybrid system. You have like the machine aspects, which you can really do the comparisons to regular, I don't know, fuel machines or whatever. But then there is more happening, and this is what you like really, in a very good way, show us. I want to ask you, because I think it's really about experiencing these things on yourself, so that you open up to these things. And I think you told me that in the past you were very rational and like completely basically Western science aligned, and then something like some shift has happened. And I also had this myself. Like for me, it was really a higher consciousness state that opened me up to see beyond like what mainstream science, how I would call it, tells me. And I think you also had like a similar journey. And I think this is just I think it's good if you share it a bit, you know, that other people are like, it's a process, you know, like this doesn't happen on its own. It's not about reading books per se that you open up yourself to these things, but it's often about personally experiencing these things.
Absolutely. I think this is the key point. First has to happen some experience, like getting healed, or a kind of expanded state of consciousness, and afterwards then you can read books and see that this small box where you lived in isn't everything, isn't the whole universe. And this is what happened to me, because I always have been very interested in biology and physics and classical psychology. And when I came out of school, I thought I had understood the world more or less. And it was later on that I had experiences that showed me this is not everything. And
If you're enjoying Sunlight Matters, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform. You can also search Sunlight Matters on Google to find more episodes, guest information, and further insights about sunlight analysis, solar exposure, and the way light shapes our spaces.
then I read books like C.G. Jung with transpersonal psychology, and Rupert Sheldrake, where you see that the materialistic worldview isn't the truth. Like this is sold to us, that this dogma that mind and soul are an epiphenomenon of material processes is like scientific truth, and everything else is delusion. But it shows up, no. You know, it's the materialistic worldview is a belief system. It's okay to believe in that. You know, I believed in that myself, so I have no problem with that. But we have to be careful to say this is truth, this is scientific truth. And all I saw in my journey is that science was took hostage by this positivistic, materialistic worldview, because there is so much scientific evidence for example, supernatural phenomena, for phenomena that show that our mind is expanding beyond our physical body. So there's a lot of physical evidence, but it's left out because it doesn't fit into this dogma. And it's in mainstream science, and this is what, because I interviewed so many scientists who were doing studies in fringe parts of sciences on the edges, and they had huge problems. You know, if a scientist says, you know, we should study supernatural phenomena, then they have a big problem. Like Brian Josephson, he was a Nobel Prize laureate, I think, with 23 years. And he says that if science doesn't study phenomena of the mind, also like supernatural phenomena, then science cannot expand. And for this reason, I think that there was a series of stamps in Britain with all the British Nobel Prize laureates. And then there was a committee who said Brian Josephson cannot be on this series of stamps because he's a pseudoscientist. Also, he's a Nobel Prize laureate in physics, and there are many, many, many examples. And
Well, is it? I mean, is it? I mean, I think there is the establishment. I mean, it's basically all these things. They upset the established norms, and I mean, returning to the film, because I mean, how long ago was the film made? It's been around for quite some time, hasn't
absolutely, it was in 2010 when it was released in Austria.
it? And I mean, I can tell because of the lovely Rover car you were driving around. But I think what was really fascinating for me was a lot of the things you were talking about. You know, I can imagine in 2010 would have been bordering on the heretical into sort of normal traditional science. Now traditional science is having to go, well, actually, there might be some stuff in. So, you know, you talk about things like biophotons and, you know, this energy. And, you know, I've just had a conversation with someone who in a lab is showing that light impacts metabolism. You know, so the mechanism, I mean, we didn't go into how that happens, but it's sort of coming now. And, you know, what I'm kind of interested in is your views around kind of the lag that seems to be, but are you kind of optimistic now when you kind of look back on the film? Because I think the film is almost more relevant now than it was.
Absolutely.
It was in
Yeah,
2000.
its time has come. I mean, this is what we see
Yeah.
across the
I mean,
board.
I saw how science change personally. You know, you mentioned a few things, but they are still like fringe. You know, that mitochondria can use light directly to produce energy. There are studies already, but the most impressive thing I witnessed was when I was interviewing all these doctors and physiologists and dietists. They all said to me in the 2000s, they said to me, fasting is either dangerous or it has no use. This was in the 2000s. And there was just one professor who said to me, you know, we have now some studies that show that 12 to 14 hours of fasting could be quite good. That was when I started doing intermittent fasting. And in 2016, then the Nobel Prize was given for the studies around autophagy. And Osumi, who started the research, you know, autophagy is this phenomenon that is like the cleaning of the cell when you are doing fasting. And he started this research in the 1990s, and it was around for 20 years, but these studies from the molecular biologists didn't come to the to the medical scientists. And it was for me very interesting to see how this changed in 10 years, because nowadays everybody knows fasting is good and is an anti-aging thing. And, it was just about 10 years, and it was the Nobel Prize that it created this, because suddenly when something gets the Nobel Prize, then everybody knows it. But you have a lot of studies that before they are published, or they get before they get a big prize, then they are in their little branches and nobody talks about it. Like you said, the studies around light and mitochondria, or the studies from Gerald Pollack about the force phase of water, our body of water, that is charged by light energy and by the radiation from the Earth. There's so much knowledge. There are so many studies, and there's a big difference between knowledge a lot of scientists have in their little branches and the collective consciousness, what is known everywhere. And things that contradict the materialistic worldview just don't get published, or just get published in their little magazines. But
Not anymore. I think it's really changing. It's really about, like, it feels like throughout the whole world there is like an increasing openness to these things. And of course there will always be hardliners who lock themselves off of this. But I mean, that's their decision. It's cool. I think, the problem, you could say, is that these studies are funded, and that costs money, often tax money. And I think it also makes sense that tax money is not wasted on complete, utter hardcore nonsense. But I mean, this is also what's happening in classical mainstream science. There is money used for completely bonkers stuff. So that there should just be, like, as soon as the awareness increases and people are more open, they will also demand these things to happen. And then it's just a matter of time, and then we see it already. So I'm just very optimistic. I really think it's the time for all these things now.
I'm also optimistic, but there's also this saying, you only can see what you can explain. So if something doesn't fit in a worldview, then if you cannot explain it for yourself that this could be, then they don't give research money for that. And I think that's currently still the big problem, that we have this materialistic dogma in science, which makes it very difficult to use governmental money for these studies. There are institutes like the Institute of Noetic Sciences who do research on everyday supernatural phenomena, like the phenomenon of being stared at, or recognition, or anything like that.
Like the X-Files of academia.
Yeah. But this is money from people who from donations, and not governmental money, because you don't get governmental money for research on supernatural phenomena or things like that.
There just needs to be a big breakthrough, like this organization, for example, I don't know, discovering a warp drive or whatever, and then the return of investment is so massive that people realize, hey, it's actually worth it to do some more.
Yeah, and I mean, the research is done by the military and by agencies. They use this stuff, like in the Stargate project, and for me it's so strange that some phenomena are so obvious, and it's so obvious that science cannot explain them, and still they reject research on this stuff. I mean, like life energy itself, science has no clue what life energy is, and still these ideas who could explain this are rejected.
It's really, because I think we believe, or we're taught, I don't know, somehow we have this idea that science and doctors, they know what they're talking about. So but you know, my experience is that over time you realize they're kind of clutching at straws. I mean, I went to a doctor. He was using Google to sort of like try and work out what was going on with me, and I was
Yeah.
like, this is a first for me, really. And and it's kind of interesting. It's sort of one of those penny drop moments where you're like, oh, okay, maybe the establishment isn't quite as clued up as we think it is. I mean, going back to your film,
Definitely not.
going back to your film, what's really nice about it is you make it quite accessible to people by effectively walking through a bunch of case studies of people going into labs and having tests done on them. And you know, I guess you could have done another version of the film, which is like you go into rural India and you meet the people, and you know, we all have to take your word for it. And I think it's sort of like, I really like that process of kind of demystifying the, you know, and having serious scientists talking about what they were looking at. And I guess we shouldn't forget that if you want to kind of talk about these things, you do have to have a almost establishment way in as well, don't you?
Absolutely. And for me, it was very important to have all these doctors. And first, I thought, you know, all these specialists who talk about physiology, they will love me out if I come in with such an idea. And I was quite surprised that they were interested in this stuff. And the thing is that really the specialists who know about metabolism know that there are huge parts that are not explained. It's only the mathematicians and astrologers, not astrologers,
Astronomers, yeah.
astronomers,
Let's
who
not
And
are,
open this
astrologers.
bug.
So, I mean, there
yeah.
must be a few astrologers
open
who are
not-
astronomers as well. By the way, Neptune's in Aries at the moment, just as an aside.
Good to know.
And you know, all these scientists who are in the skeptics communities, these famous skeptics communities, who are often not into physiology or biology, and then they say, that this is against science and this is all stupid. But they didn't do the research how huge the knowledge gap is in the human body, and what we don't know. And this was interesting for me, and also to see when they saw these studies, how interested they were, and how the mechanism, of course they couldn't explain it or say how it works, but they at least could see that it could be possible.
But that's
Yeah,
cool.
no,
I mean, didn't trigger that interest on their side to open up a bit and look at the evidence that you collected?
The guys I interviewed did, you know, they were completely normal professors at the Vienna University, but just the specialists. There I also got the prize for the biggest nonsense of the year in the German-speaking skeptics community, because, you know, this is like the church of positivists, and they get really angry if you question their belief system. And there are guys like comedians and mathematicians and all that stuff, and they say we are science, but you know that they have no clue about physiology. They don't know all these studies about calorimetry and that stuff. They just are completely bought into this idea that we are just living on calories and nothing else.
Did you encounter a situation where you talked to a scientist and they said something on camera and then they asked you to cut it out of the movie? Like maybe some, I don't know, admitting something, or like, was this ever a topic? Or
No, I had one doctor who he's only about 4 seconds in the movie. He was very careful. You know, he didn't want to lean
Get his
out of the window
reputation
too
touched
much.
by appearing in your movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And afterwards, late, but this was later on because with the movie, in Austria, I got quite infamous as I got this prize for the biggest nonsense and then all that stuff. And when I wrote the book about intermittent fasting, I did an interview with the doctor, and when he found out that I did a movie about Breatharianism, then he said, "No, I don't want my name in the book."
Well,
That's completely okay. You know, I know it's really dangerous if you lean out of the window that far, and for journalists and filmmakers, it's not that dangerous. But if you are into academia, then it gets really dangerous. And there are a few doctors I interviewed and a few scientists. Not all are in the film. As I said, I did 200 hours of footage, but there are a few who lost their jobs. Not because of my movie, but because they did research that wasn't good for science. Like there was a professor for homeopathy in Vienna. There was only just one professor for homeopathic medicine in Austria. And, you know, I don't know if homeopathy works better than the placebo effect. I always say the placebo effect is the proof for faith healing. You know, you do just some ritual and it works. But and I'm no specialist in homeopathic medicine, but I know that this professor only got the people where all the doctors said, you know, give it to him because they will die anyway. He had huge successes, and if you look into homeopathic medicine, then normally, at least in the German-speaking countries, I don't know how it's in the English-speaking countries, but in the big magazine it says, you know, it's all bullshit. You know, proven 100 times, homeopathic medicine is bullshit. But if you're actually looking at the meta studies concerning homeopathic medicine, then it looks completely different. There is a meta study with, I think, 156 studies around homeopathic medicine, questioning, is it working better than placebo? And more than 40% of the studies show that homeopathic medicine works better than placebo. Only 7% of the studies show that it doesn't work better than a placebo, and more than around 50% are not sure about that question. But based on this data, it's not scientific to say it's proven wrong 100 times. No, you know, we are not sure.
I mean, again, it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I love what you just said about placebo, by the way. I mean, you know, we have a saying in English about mind over matter. Like, you know, when you want to do something and excel, they go, it's mind over matter. And, you know, the more I think about that, I'm like, well, that's just telling you that, you know, your mind can do incredible things. So, you know, going back to the film, like, you know, there's some extraordinary characters that you come across. I mean, there was the Indian gentleman who they have in a lab for 10 days and he, you know, doesn't eat, he doesn't urinate or defecate, you know, and, you know, you go, well, what on earth is going on there? I mean, and my son asked me to ask you as well. He said, well, I'm doing biology. Look at the human body. The human body is basically one alimentary canal with a brain attached to it. And I was like, well, you're right. But I said, there must be other things going on. But going back to this, that Indian gentleman had spent years meditating, and he was able to control his physiology. And, actually, when you think about like what you just said about placebo, that doesn't seem so extraordinary that people could do that. I mean, I don't know how they're doing it, but it doesn't seem out of the realms that could happen.
I also don't know it. I mean, as we talked, there are a few hints, like our body water. That our body water is a very special liquid that is able to extract energy from the surroundings. But these are all just tiny puzzle pieces. I think nobody currently knows what's going on there, and at the current state, we would have to say this is a miracle. But in my perception, what I learned during my study is that, and my research is that matter isn't what I learned in school. Matter isn't these balls flying around. It's frozen light, like David Bohm says. And if I have this understanding that matter is just vibrating energy, and this solidness of matter is an illusion of my senses, then suddenly it gets more conceivable that all these miracles could happen.
100%.
And this is just, I also don't know how it works, but I came across so many, for us, miraculous things. And it's not just one, if it would be just this Indian gentleman, then you could say, okay, it's a conspiracy of Indian doctors and the military.
Yeah.
But you find these all over the world. Especially with this idea of Breatharianism, this is just isn't just an idea created by some esoterics. You find it in all cultures throughout all time. They were tested always by kings and emperors who didn't believe it, and then they locked in these people. And you again and again got proof that there is something true about it. And you find this with all supernatural phenomena. And this was for me kind of the bottom line, that to say I know nothing, and just to look at the world and not look at the world with my explanation of the world, but to just take what is there and then try to find an explanation.
I think,
but for many things, we just don't have an explanation. These are mysteries.
like referring to what I said in the beginning, is like personal experiences. And if you ever reached, like in a meditation or in a shamanic ceremony, if you ever reach like this higher consciousness level, or maybe you have an out of body experience. Like I have a good friend who had a near death experience. He was dead 5 minutes, like his heart stopped beating for 5 minutes, and he saw himself like in this operation room, floating, seeing his body like motionless, lying on the bed. I mean, these are experiences, nobody can take them from you, and suddenly you wonder, okay, how are all these things possible? Like, how is all the education I received in my childhood, in my teenage years, it doesn't answer these questions at all. And suddenly you really open up to many things. And then, how I see it, I go through life, and if I encounter some explanations for phenomena that I experienced myself, that answer some questions, like answer more questions than raising new ones. And it just feels, I don't know, relaxing to get this new piece of information, which just completes the puzzle I have in my mind about the whole experience as a human being. I mean, I always often start with the question, I mean, who am I even? Like, what is this whole thing about here? Like, what am I doing here? I mean, I'm talking with you guys now about a very interesting topic, but what's happening? Like, why is this all happening? And I think these are very foundational questions where mainstream science has no answer at all, and all the answers they give are just disrespectful to life. I would say it's not appreciating life energy, because, as you say, like, they're working on dead bodies. They don't even have any grasp of it, but it's just not fulfilling. And I think it's about being just very open and curious, and being also ready to just accept completely new perspectives. It just feels much more awesome. I remember when I was a child, I was so into physics and science, and I was just reading all these books, and it gave me so much joy, and I love it. And I think there is no mutual exclusivity on these things, because it's like all the layers. But now I feel like, okay, I've reached this level now. I understand some basic things, but I want to go deeper. I want to learn more. And this is where mainstream science is just blocking itself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, one of the other things which I'm picking up, like in the kind of mainstream science, is I'm starting to hear a lot more people go, "Shit, this stuff is amazing." Like, you know, the connection between light and life, and where mitochondria. What a mitochondria does is, I mean, I'm still trying to get my head around it, but they have these little engines which use electrons to twist. And as they twist, they turn glucose effectively into energy, or
Yeah.
ATP. Like, and the more scientists are starting to look at that and go, it is fun. So I'm starting to hear scientists say, actually, I'm opening my mind to other things. So I've heard about a few scientists who say they pray, and a few are reading the Bible. So there is a sort of, I guess, enlightenment maybe kind of happening around the edges. But to your point, like, it almost feels like the enlightenment is we all need to say we know nothing and start from
Yeah.
a kind of a point of sort of like everything's on the table. And, until it's taken off the table, you can't kind of sort of go for it, whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you get that sense at all that there might be people who are like from the traditionalist that is sort of opening their minds a bit more to this?
Absolutely. And in my perception, the more people know and the more people experience, the more they open up. And there is this saying from Werner Heisenberg, I think, who says, if you take the first sip of the glass of science, you become an atheist. If you drink it to the bottom, you start to believe in God. And I mean, God is just a big word, but I think it's coming back to this respect for life, for these miracles. Every single cell in our body is a miracle, and we consist out of billions of these miracles, and we become a new miracle. We could not survive 1 millisecond if we would have to choose how this should work. So it's all a big miracle, and if you understand that, then I think then you look at it the right way, and then you can try to understand things better. There is a famous water researcher in Austria, Victor Schauberger. Actually, Gerald Pollack just proved his work about water electricity, and he always said that you have to meditate about nature. And he said he sends out his mind to water, and then it's coming back with the ideas and the explanations. And he said, first it doesn't translate well in English. In German, it's die Natur kapieren und kopieren. It means to first to understand nature and then copy nature. And he made a lot of great inventions. I mean, like Nikola Tesla, he understood how his uh, how electricity works when he saw two snakes fighting together. And there are a lot of stories of people who got the most genius ideas when contemplating about nature. Because just by recombining the things that are already there, you don't find really genius stuff. So yeah, I think this is really important, and this is also my background about meditation. If you contemplate and if you go down your subconsciousness to this layer of transcendence, then come new ideas, and from there also this inner light comes, this coherent information that is also coming from the sun.
Which is like most of the time just drowning in the signal to noise ratio. This is why meditation is so awesome, because you silence your mind and your thoughts and your senses, and suddenly you have access to an information layer that is just not visible because it's just drowning in the signal noise ratio. And I think, I mean, just a thought that I had, like, when we were talking, is like when you as a human being, you are being formed in the womb of your mother, and like the cells start dividing, like when the sperm hits the egg, and I think, I'm sure you've seen like this light burst around
Yeah.
and of course that's a chemical reaction, but it seems like light is just a super foundational aspect of life. And when you think about the Indian philosophies about Brahman, like the finest matter possible, which is like the end, and then on the other side you have spirit, or please correct me if I'm talking nonsense here, but it's like this, it's like the photons are like the very essential measurable building blocks, and everything around it just is attracted. It's like us being consciousness, and we are attracting matter and cells to allow our separated consciousness bit to act in this world through a human body, through everything that is building upon it. But it's like, it's building from the inside out. It's not from the outside in, as the Western people would say.
Yeah, and for me, it was so funny that a lot of ideas of Eastern philosophy are now more or less proven by modern science. And as you said, Brahman, for example, when we speak about the Big Bang and what was before the Big Bang, and yeah, it's like Brahman breathing. It was what's telling us Eastern philosophy, and this idea that matter is just vibrating energy and frozen light, as modern physicists say, and that this solidity is just an illusion of our senses. This is more or less the idea of Maya in Indian philosophy, that the physical creation is a big illusion. It's the matrix. And when I got this prize for the biggest nonsense of the year from the Skeptic Society, I went there and said thank you for this prize, because they invited me, and thank you for doing all the promotion for my film, because they really tried hard that it's not seen anywhere, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. So
because it's so dangerous, right? That's
because it's such a dangerous film. And
Yeah.
it's not dangerous at all, because of course I say a lot of times in the movie, please don't try this yourself. Of course it's dangerous if you just stop eating. That's out of the question, but that's not the point of the film. I said the point of the film is questioning the materialistic worldview, and then and I said, of course that's understandable that you shout now, because this is a circle of materialists, but I'm not the only one who questions the materialistic worldview. all the big physicists did. And then I ended with this quote from Max Planck, the founder of modern physics, where he says, as a man who devoted his whole life researching matter, he can say the one thing: matter as such doesn't exist. Behind matter, there is an conscious mind, and this conscious mind is the matrix of all matter. And they all were, it was really funny. But that's the whole point of the thing, because if you understand this, then suddenly everything opens up and
But PA,
everything is possible.
what happened? I mean, I think so in the like 1900s or like in this range, we had many scientists who were very open, like they made major breakthrough discoveries, and it was like pretty much common sense to be open-minded in these regards. And today, I mean, I think it's again changing, as we talked before, but let's say in the last 20 years, it feels like anything that goes out of the ordinary is attacked and rejected. Why did science change so much?
I think it was that was what church was before, that you had this idea of God is now changed with the idea of matter is everything, and instead of the priests we have now the scientist, and I think Brian Josephson said, you now also have the popes in science and the holy books, the peer-reviewed journals, and if you say something different and have a different idea, then you are excluded out of the church of science. But this is completely unscientific, because it's most important to question scientific ideas and to question everything. You just have to bring a proof. And of course, they all say, yeah, but the proof isn't good enough. But that's the problem. They say if the proof that it is put forth doesn't prove the materialistic worldview, then it cannot be, and then they just don't believe it, and then this has to be a bad scientist, and then these doctors who studied the Indian gentleman, they make a big conspiracy or anything like that. They have the most crazy ideas because they just don't want to look at the actual proof that is there.
So, I mean, reflecting on some of this, though, I mean, it is interesting that, like, your points around nature, I mean, up until maybe 100 years ago, the majority of people were much better connected with nature, and I guess you go back even further, that connection was not just a sort of living physical one, it was a religious one as well. So, and it's sort of only in the last 100 years, which is, I guess, this rise of materialistic, it's quite patriarchal as well, which is kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
And it sort of feels, there's a lot of protection in there, because ultimately now there's a lot of money going, I mean, Georg and I, we spend a lot of time thinking about the sun, but we have yet to run into the sunscreen industry, but we will run into the sunscreen industry.
Or will we?
Yeah, we're hoping to at some point, because there's an industry with making billions out of basically very wonky science, actually.
And fraud. I mean, partially like literal fraud.
We maybe don't want to say that.
Oh.
Well, it may be fraud. We don't know, but
I think that's pretty
but
hard.
no. But look, and it's kind of, I think, again, whilst, like, your film worked for me because I came away from it and my mind's already pretty open, but the message was really clear that you shouldn't take anything off the table. Like, even like, I give you an example, is there are a couple of the experiments where that you show that people lost a bit of weight when they were being sort of watched in the labs, you know, and at one level you could say, well, that's evidence that they'd stopped eating, or but then they were also under these are people who rely on nature and air and sunlight to get their nutrition, and they weren't getting that. So, you know, it was like, okay, well, that would probably be the answer to all of these things. So, you know, I guess my point is it sort of really helped me to open my mind. And I think as a film, like every student of biology or philosophy should probably watch it, because I think it's just a very nice alternative view on something that most people can kind of understand, you know.
And it's what I wanted is a starting point for discussion, because of course this isn't giving any answers. Actually, it's just thought provoking, and then you have to go deeper and discuss it, because there's so much subtext in it. And then, as you just said, it was 4 years after I published the film when Gerald Pollack came up with this. With his research about the fourth phase of water, and he said he thinks he has an explanation for how this could work. And then for me, suddenly there was a missing link, what I didn't understand, because one of the Kung Fu masters in my film said you shouldn't do Bigu, so Breatharianism, in the cities, because the chi fields there are disturbed, and you don't have a lot of negatively charged ions, because you need these negatively charged ions and good chi fields. And I didn't understand that. Why speaks a kung fu doctor to me about electricity, more or less? And with the work of Gerald Pollack, I suddenly understood it, because our body water is negatively charged, and we need this negative charge to be kind of nourished. And indoors you have positive charge normally, especially if the air is coming from the air condition.
There you go. I
So
mean, yeah,
yeah, it's like proving that sailing works in an indoor pool where you do not have wind. So you have to create different study protocol to understand these things.
definitely. I mean, I love the fact you mentioned Gerald Pollack, because I arrived at him in a slightly different way. I was swimming down a river in Finland. It was a natural river, pristine. And I've forgotten who the Austrian gentleman is, but I did have a weird sensation that the river was talking to me.
Wow.
And, you know, it was sort of,
Straubinger, I think you mean.
Schauberger, Victor Schauberger.
yeah. So I'd definitely look him up. But I've been while swimming a long time. But what I really understood is I hadn't understood water itself. And that was, I don't know, it was sort of a weird kind of spiritual moment. And got out and, you know, then ended up trying to find a bit more on water and what was going on with water, and ended up listening to a podcast with Gerald Pollack, which I think was, for me, I found it a very moving experience, actually, because of the way he talked about it. I sort of experienced, and it's sort of like you ran a seminar, and Georg sent me a picture of one of your slides and said, we need to talk to this bloke. And I'm like, I'd love to. I'm trying to kind of get him lined up, because I think he, for us, is a bit of a missing link. So,
And it's also like fascinating his story about like being a renowned scientist and then opening up to new stuff, and suddenly he had problems in his work. It's like the same pattern, even though like this man is much more intelligent than many of his critics ever could be, you know, like even on a complete mainstream level. This is so, I think it's fascinating to me that people who climb up very high in the in academia, and they are renowned and respected, and then they open up to further topics, and suddenly they are cancelled. This is, for me, it's really fascinating, by people who have never even been in the mainstream academia ladder as high up there. This is just fascinating. I think it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like in the church. It's like what Brian Josephson said. Then you are a heretic, and then you get excluded out of the Church of Science.
I never was in church, so I mean I was in churches, but I wasn't raised like in like Catholic or any way. So maybe I'm just
Yeah.
not used to this. I think it's good, actually.
So, I mean, one thing that would be interesting is to go back and talk to some of those scientists now, and that you had in your film, and just say, well, what do you think now? Like, here's some of the other research which is out. I mean, if you were going to do a follow-up, that might be quite an interesting one. I mean, have you got any thoughts on what some of these people might say?
I mean, the guys I interviewed probably are still more open now.
Right.
Where I don't think anything has changed is with the skeptic guys, because they are, scientists can be conveyed when there is different proof, but these guys aren't scientists for me. They are believers, and they just use science to get authority. But it's the philosophy of positivism was created by a guy called Auguste Comte, and he actually wanted to create the church, and this is what we have now. And when we are going back to the foundations, to Francis Bacon, he had this utopian idea of a world that is ruled by a caste of scientific priests, and this is now what we got, more or less. And what a lot of people want, that the science is ruled by the world is ruled by experts and scientists. It's of course understandable and good in a way, but the problem starts when it isn't allowed to question certain belief systems. Then it's again the same problem that we had with Catholic Church in the last few hundred years.
I,
And we were so happy that we got rid of that, and now we have a new belief system.
I was reading an article about RFK trying to push back against the establishment. So he's the head of, the medical establishment in the
Yeah,
US, and he's having a real job just getting people to understand that he wants them to be more open. Like, he's not
yeah.
saying I've got all the answers. He's saying, so I don't know. I mean, I hate to talk about politics, and he may or may not be right about various things, but it's interesting how the establishment, how established the establishment is.
Yeah, ideas are harder than rock, I think Max Planck said.
Yeah.
You cannot change an existing or an existing paradigm only changes when a new generation of people is born. It's very hard to convince uh, people as when they don't have an experience that changes their mind, that if they get healed or anything like that, just by rational arguments, it's hardly impossible. And then that's what I also realized with my film. When you try to give arguments and good proof, you cannot convince somebody if he says this is nonsense. I tried, for example, to enhance the Wikipedia article about my movie with scientific journals, and then they just say, if you want to put in a piece of Gujarati Medical Journal, then they say Gujarati Medical Journal isn't just a good thing. We don't put this in, but the private blog of the skeptics president is good evidence. So then you just stop arguing, because
It reminds me of like this Elon Musk quote where he's asked about longevity, and like removing death from the human journey, basically, and he's very much against it, and he argues that if people would live forever, there would never be like this natural, like reset. So if
Yeah.
you're very stubborn and you live forever, you're gonna stay stubborn like this forever, and there's no room for new ideas. So death is like a built-in reset button
inherent
to
part
give
of
chance
life.
to new thoughts, and I
Yeah.
resonates with me.
Control Alt Delete Move. So one thing I'm interested in is how you found us, by the way. 'Cause
Yeah, this was really a great thing, because I was looking for a property on an Austrian real estate platform, and I saw how it
I think we
works.
can say it's Willhaben, right? I mean, we are
Will,
very proud
yeah,
that we are integrated
will
there.
have Mate.
Yeah.
And I said, "Wow, this is great." And then I was interested, because naturally I admire the sun, and I want as much sun as possible. And I was looking for another property in the mountains, and then I wanted to see how is the sun on the 21st of December, and that's when I had to buy the premium version. And I really thought, wow,
Gotcha.
that's a good idea, because it's hard to convince somebody to pay for the premium version with an app. But this, you see it on this one day how great it works. But especially when you are into real estate, you need the whole year, and then you have to buy the premium version. So yeah, and it really looks nice. And I was very surprised that it's coming from an Austrian founder, because I thought this is an app from Silicon Valley, because it looks so perfect and great. And
We will tell this our product team.
yeah,
well, they
it's
can we'll
great
force them
app.
to listen to the podcast and say,
Yeah, until the
there's
end.
a good bit at the end. So,
Yeah, and I mean, then I saw your name popping up in our sales ticker. So we always see like when somebody buys it, and then I was reading PA Straubinger at ORF at. I think it was really the ORF address, and I was like, hey, that's the guy who did this documentary, and I haven't seen it up to we got to know each other, and I was like, but man, this was also like the propaganda minister of the ÖVP, and I really mixed you up with Peter L. Eppinger. I thought it's the same person. I was
It's a
just
different guy.
I didn't think about it much, I was like, how interesting, how like diverse a person can be. And then I googled your name because I just wanted to get a quick idea, and then I realized, hey, that's two different persons. And then before that, actually, I was like, okay, don't be so judgmental, whatever, be open. It's cool that this guy is buying a product. And I wanted to talk with you. So I wrote you an email and I said, hey, I mean, we are on a similar mission, and let's talk. And then we met. And yeah, I'm just very happy I met you. It's so cool what you're doing. And I think very inspirational how you handle criticism, and how centered you are, courageous as well, and just very progressive. I think, I mean, 15 years ago, that's pretty wild to produce such a piece, and I'm just very optimistic and happy to see how the world is changing. I mean, we see it ourselves, like with the business. 3 years ago or 2 years ago, it was extremely hard to convince bigger customers to use Shadow Map to improve the user experience for their audiences, and now this is really opening up. So I think our time has come.
Absolutely, because I think light, especially when it's about apartments and houses and properties. I mean, light is the most essential thing, and to know how the light is falling and where the shadows. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful invention.
It's actually today, for the first time since I think November, I had direct sunlight into my apartment again, which is on the first floor. So my living room table, I took a picture. It's like a very emotional moment for me to have it back
You didn't
finally.
use Shadow app when you bought the.
Yeah, it wasn't invented back then when I got
Well,
here.
no, I think, I mean, what we're seeing is the world is waking up to this. Like, I think it is fantastic. I think, we believe we can do our bit. We can get more people outside and in the sunshine and living lives where the sunlight is more to their preferences, then we can really help change things. And again, the conversation I had this morning was the converse of that is people don't connect. They live inside under LED lights. LED lights are suppressing our metabolism, not just keeping an even keel on them. They're suppressing our metabolism. So if we don't kind of get the message out there, then the danger is we have a generation of people, us and our children and our grandchildren, all getting sicker. So
Yeah.
anyway, well, listen, thank you so much. I really encourage people to watch the film, because not only are you an incredible human being, you're a bloody good filmmaker as well. So
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the film. I think it needs re-releasing, because I think its time is now. So
Yeah, I think this film doesn't get old. It's the next
yeah.
3,000 years it works.
And Georg's offered to do a prana session. Come on, Georg, 21 days. That's all you got to do. So
Oh, whoa. Okay. Actually, yeah. I mean, I'm really.
Be careful.
no. I mean,
No, I think like doing this, trying this once in your life. I mean, why not trying it? Like preparing properly and
Actually,
trying
I
it.
was, that there is this
Maybe it's
video
the fear
diary
first.
in the movie, and I wanted to try it myself, but first you have to do a lot of fasting, and I have a lot of fasting experience, but before that I did prolonged times of fasting, and then suddenly I realized, no way, I love food and I enjoy food so much. It's a completely crazy idea to put this away from my life. And this is like the most breatharians said, if I would feel hunger or the lust for food, I would eat immediately. These guys cannot eat, and that's a big difference.
Like they throw it up, right? This is what you're saying.
Yeah, they throw it up, and most important, they don't lose weight. If you lose weight and if you lose energy, then this is not breatharianism. Then you are dying. So that's a huge difference.
I mean, there's a chap with his wife, and he sort of sat there while she's eating.
Yeah.
And I was like, he looks like, I don't know, you're stereotypical kind of Austrian or German or a Brit, of a certain age, looks very healthy, looks very happy. And I was like, I cannot imagine a world in which I'd be able to sit there and watch someone eat.
Me either. I know how good food tastes when you do a week of fasting, and then how difficult it is when your wife sits across you eating.
I sort of had to think about it, and I was like, well, look, our physiology is obviously designed for food at some level, but maybe being much more mindful of that food intake. As you say, maybe doing more fasting, maybe, I'm trying to eat much more locally as well. So being much more, if people ask me, I'd say I'm a qualitarian now. So,
Yeah.
I try and buy quality, which, it costs more money, but it's sort of like just kind of engaging with it as a mental process, not just sort of sitting there going, I eat, therefore I am, which seems to be the kind of modern day world way of doing things. And I sort of feel like, there's a sort of continuum, isn't there? And you want to be on the right side of that continuum. But everybody can take the lessons, I think, from breatharianism and apply it to their lives, and I think a lot of it is about that, being much more mindful about stuff.
Absolutely.
And I think what's also like looking back to what PA said in the midst of the podcast about food being the information carrier, there's a lot of research, of not published in Nature yet, but how seasonal food is healthy to your body. Like when you eat the veggies which are available in winter versus those which are available in summer, this also has seemingly effects on your health. I'm not there yet. Like I drink my freshly pressed orange juice in the winter because I really like it, but I'm hearing that it's really not good actually. It cools you down and all these things. So I think that's again like another artifact of how the information of sunlight is really directly
Yeah, and in the
guiding
oranges,
us.
you at least have a lot of sunlight, that
Yeah.
you also even see it, as I learned from biophoton research in eggs, eggs that are from hens that are living outside, they have more light in them.
Mhm.
So I
Well,
fresh food with a lot of light is better.
definitely, definitely, definitely. Anyway, well, thank you so much. Really
Thanks for
appreciate.
having me.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thanks for listening to Sunlight Matters, brought to you by Shadow Man, where we explore how sunlight influences the way we build, design, and live each day. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe, follow, and leave a review on your preferred streaming platform. You can also search Sunlight Matters on Google to find all our episodes, guest information, and resources about sunlight analysis, solar exposure, and the best home orientation for natural light. You can also head over to shadowmat.org, where you can download our iOS app for free today to visualize how sun is currently impacting your life. We appreciate you being part of the conversation, and we'll see you next time, where you can keep exploring the world through the lens of light.